Hello, everyone.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Inverted Orthodoxy Podcast. My name is Blake. I'm with Doug and Kyle, and we are pastors at Living Springs Church, but we love answering your questions about anything, but mostly related to faith and just the twists and turns and just the debates and interesting thoughts we can have about that faith. So we're going to jump in and ask the first question today, which is this. Why are so many young adults leaving the church or deconstructing their faith? Not sure I like the term deconstruction used in a broad sense. Many people use it to define any sort of doubting or questioning or wrestling in their faith. Israel literally means wrestles with God. Part of this question then, have Christians forgot how to wrestle either God?
I think it's supposed to be wrestle with God.
With God, yes. Well,
There's some good questions in this question.
Awesome stuff in this question. Just before we jump into it, I want to take a moment to recognize if you're listening to these episodes and not watching them, we have been in the same outfits for the last 4 weeks. We are currently recording this on January 7th, and we're answering questions from, I believe, either late October or early November.
Probably,
So if you're sending it AER, if you are asking new questions, there is a long list, and 2 we've been recording in succession for Doug's upcoming surgery, so we can have some fresh episodes there. So so you are aware here in how time space works in podcast world, in keeping you up to date. We're not ignoring questions or AER. We're just trying to plan ahead, keep us episodes going, and we also happen to have a long question list here. So with all that said, let's jump back
Either
to the question.
that or every week now we wear the same clothes because eventually we're going to start a fundraiser for new wardrobes for us.
Oh my. That's when I quit.
Oh boy.
Oh man. All right, back to the question about deconstruction.
Yeah, why are so many young adults leaving the church or deconstructing their faith? Well, the interesting thing is that there are a lot of young adults not leaving the church. Young adults are joining the church in huge numbers. The fastest growing segment of the church in at least America, I don't know if it's North America, is
America for sure.
yeah, but we often mirror
Yeah.
that.
But Britain, Gen Z, have gone up 4 times in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and some
Gen
of
Z.
that is due to the rise of the political right and Christian nationalism and some of the identification of some of that. And some of that is also because it's not always all happening in evangelical churches. Some of it's happening in liturgical churches. And
A lot of it is. Yeah.
yeah, what I've been reading about and hearing is that it's the result of growing up in a world where nothing is eternal, not even eternal. Nothing's even a decade old. Everything's constantly changing. That this idea of something being forever, something being long lasting is really wonderful for that generation.
Catholics, the Orthodox Church, and the Anglican churches are in parts of the world seeing some of the biggest rise numerically. Millennials are also coming back to church at faster rates than any older generations than them. It's Gen X who are leaving the church most consistently right now is what we're seeing in some of those numbers. Overall, there's still a cultural... I was just listening to Carrie Niehoff yesterday talk about this. Overall, church is still declining in North America and in the Western world overall, though some of these trends are statistically significant amongst younger people so far. And we're hoping for that to continue. The other thing that's contributing largely to this in North America and some of the growth, I know even this has been true for a few years in Canada, is large numbers of global redistribution. And so there's a lot of people coming from other parts of the world
here,
landing in, I know Canada, for instance, who are already Christians, but inflating the church numbers because they're coming already looking for a church as Christians. And so Pentecostalism has been one of the largest benefactors of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because Pentecostalism has grown so fast in the global south
Right.
that then when people relocate within the world, at one point, I believe it was either 2020 or 2021, Pentecostalism was the largest growing denomination in Canada, not because of new salvations, but because of new people landing here who were Pentecostal.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah. And so I think there's a number of factors coming. Overall, young people are not necessarily leaving the faith. I'll even say it that way first. And not necessarily leaving the church as 2 distinct points. Because I think there's value to talk about them separately. There are a lot of young people who are really drawn to Christianity and are not finding it easy to find a church home that will make space for them. And there are other young people who are leaving church homes with the word deconstruction thrown at them, as you've indicated here, some question and doubting, and then you aren't given space for that. So they leave going to church while still being really closely associated in their minds to the faith. And so there's a lot of these things that are going on all at the same time. Growth and loss, and discovering of faith and losing faith, and redefining faith and not, that all have to be kind of thought out in this process.
I recommend the book Invisible Jesus.
Yep.
To talk about this by Scott McKnight.
Yep.
And somebody else.
Yeah. So good.
I'm sorry if the other author is listening.
There's a lot of what Scott McKnight was that we just attribute to Scott McKnight, because it's like he so generously brings other people in to write with him.
He does.
And then we go, well, I like Scott.
And I've read so much of Scott's stuff that I'm always like, hey, it's Scott McKnight, and a guy or a girl. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Totally. So I actually want to start at the end of this question. I think you've nailed this one. So many churches have failed and forgotten the ability to wrestle with God.
Well, so where I wanted to go with that was, have Christians forgotten how to wrestle with God well?
Yeah.
I think that the problem is that Christians have not been told they're allowed to wrestle with God. I think that the church has oftentimes done everything it can to prevent that, more so than help people through it.
Yep. And I think we're still on the coattails of the Enlightenment, and the church's response to that.
It was 500 years ago.
I know. And I think we're still living in the same world. And I think when some of the rest of culture...
sorry, I thought you meant like it's this new arrival. You mean like it's on its way out?
No, it's affected the... No, I mean, we're not arriving. We are still being affected by that shift.
Yes, I thought, I do just...
How I phrase
never mind. I'm good. Just leave me alone over in the corner by myself.
So Christians, I think, are still often responding to... We need to prove that, like the rest of the world with all their scientific knowledge, we actually know all the things and we've got all the answers.
Yep.
And so we've done that. Right now, there's still kind of, it's slowly dying, but when I was in Bible college, the big push again for apologetics and how important apologetics was going to be for the next revival. And like, we're going to shore up all the answers and figure it all out. And you've got these big movements for organizations like Answers in Genesis. And nothing not wrong. Like, we can have those debates on how we interpret certain parts and all that. But I don't think Christianity is ever going to win people over by their minds. It can be a doorway, and that's why I find value in wrestling with this stuff, because some people will write off Christianity for intellectual concerns. But I don't think anybody's going to be won over to Christianity through that. I think it has to be a mystic tradition and be open to what the Spirit wants to do. And I think sometimes the mind is the doorway into that. And so we are trying to compare, and you see this really high, on a really high kind of stage with the Scopes monkey trial. In the States of, we're going to figure out and we're going to respond with clear answers of God said it and this is how it happened, and then we're going to be able to show that, and then culture laughed, and then we just have tried to do the same thing since, or just subtracted into ourselves in other circumstances, and then tried to still just be like, but the Bible says it, so I believe it, that's how it is. And we've removed all the mystery and question out of it. And so we've been left with this idea of taking it from James of like the one who's tossed by the waves. And we take that idea, and instead of the wisdom that's within that, we go, well, then for you can't have any questions. So we have to be sure at all times. And then we've left, I think, multiple generations, but I think these new generations, starting from millennials, but getting more and more each one since, with the rise of the internet, of like the ability to see 50 different opinions on any one subject at all times, yes, leaves a level of confusion, but it also gives a level of freedom of exploration that the church has not always responded to well. And so when people can say, well, but what about this even other Christian tradition? And my tradition says, no, it's not that way because we've got it figured out. It just leaves such a negative taste and lack of, like I said, mysticism and freedom and joy of discovery, or wrestling with God, as this question has phrased it, that people are walking away from church because they actually have had a taste for what church is supposed to be.
When you say that people leave Christianity for intellectual concerns, I think that more often than not, it's not actually concerns about Christianity. It's concerns about the type of Christianity that they've been given and told that's the only acceptable type of Christianity.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And not to just to recognize that there is a beautiful, simple gospel message that draws us in to an eternal, infinite mystery.
Yep.
And when you say the simple gospel message that is the front door, is the whole building, you've done a disservice to what is the beauty of our faith. Most universities were started by the church. If you go back in time, like, it's weird to me that we've almost become, in some ways, in the church, and speaking generally, anti-intellectual and anti-faith.
Correct.
Which is really bizarre to me that we're in this strange place where we don't want anything to do with anything that has been scientifically proven. And so we will question some things that have been established for hundreds of years, while at the same time we're like so opposed to the mystery of our faith that we instead want to have every answer nailed down and fully explainable. And I'm like, how no wonder people get frustrated sometimes, because we're like, hey, science is terrible. Okay, then I'm going to be a mystic. You can't be a mystic. Here's all the answers to everything.
Correct.
There's, I feel like, too, there's always going to be a cultural reason for not believing in God.
Sure.
That helps, right? So in our culture right now, I was describing what you guys are describing, but I'm thinking this isn't new. Like I was definitely into these stats as a youth pastor. I was always like, oh my gosh, like everyone's leaving the church. And I was like, looking at my grade 12 class and they graduate out and I'd count how many of them, were attending church the next year and weren't. And I remember, I think it was my brother said to me, he's like, do you think this is new? Like young people not wanting to follow Jesus, like, or even what their parents told them or what culture decides for them. Like young adolescents are always going to have a rebellion to them to what is going on, right? Like that's just norm. And I think it's probably been that way since Adam and Eve are probably trying to figure out why are my kids going to church, right? Like I'm sure, how come Cain killed Abel? How come he turned out so bad? Like that obviously happened. And I think it's happened always. Following Jesus is hard. Like following God and giving up control to God, which is what the Christian faith asks us to do, is not an easy thing for us to do as human beings. So I don't know that when it says like droves of people are leaving church, or young adults specifically, that I'm like alarmed and like this is a new phenomena. I just think culturally we have new reasons, and probably reasons we should pay attention to, because if we can do better, we should. But I just don't know that it's as new as what North Americans think. And I also think just culturally, because I've done a little bit of missions work and seen that. And in Mexico City, I remember the Alliance denomination was trying specifically to plant churches in middle-class places in Mexico City. Because Mexico City is 20 million people, and very interesting that it's third world poverty, first world downtown. Like they're considered a first world nation inside the same city.
Wow.
So they were trying to plant churches in middle class suburbia and failing horribly because people who can meet their own needs don't need God. When you do missions to third world countries, they clamor to it. When you bring missional need or missional focus to, even in Canada, when we go and do stuff with street ministry, or you go into, populations where people can't meet their own needs, Jesus is wonderful. But you try and tell somebody that can meet their own need that Jesus is their savior. And so I just go, as our first worldness continues in North America, obviously it's going to be harder and harder to sell Jesus, right? So I'm not downplaying this question or saying that you guys are wrong or anything. I'm just saying there's a reality to faith that is hard.
I remember a youth pastor who was in Southwest Calgary. This is way back when I was a youth pastor. In Southwest Calgary.
What are you talking about? You're a youth pastor right now.
Again, first round one. He was at a church down in Southwest Calgary in a very rich area. And he's like, it's really hard to tell your kids that they need Jesus and then watch them leave in their Mercedes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what the shift is happening now too, in higher records, which is in some ways a good thing to be celebrated, that certain parts of struggle in our world are becoming less and less so. Violence is on a historic low. War is on a historic low these last few years. Though it's in our faces all the time on the news, globally, it is different than it ever has been. And so at the same time now, you've got more people choosing or unable to have kids for multiple different reasons on either side of those things. So historically, you kind of had the multiple licenses when people would come back to faith. They'd leave it at their driver's license. They'd come back to it at their marriage license or when they had kids.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that happen. Those are getting delayed further and further out in life. So it makes sense. You push away when you're starting to become your own person.
Yep.
Functionally, that actually happens in other mammal species. Gorillas and apes do that at the same kind of teenage level. They push away from their parents and will even sometimes leave their tribe or whatever you would call them, their group, and then maybe come back one day. That happens all across to prove independence of I'm my own person. I have to think differently and act differently than you do to your own parents. And then all of a sudden life hits you and you go, there's a reason why my parents did that, and I start doing it the same way. Totally. So maybe when you get married and the difficulty of having another person involved in your life, you go, I need something bigger than myself.
Or at least you need Jesus.
Correct. So I
need to take you to church.
And so as younger people are getting married less often, or if they're doing so, they're doing it later, they don't have as many reasons to come back that they're aware of as early. Two, they're either not having kids or they're having them later, so you've done a lot of life before that, and so now all of a sudden you're not faced with the same level of trouble as you were, or you keep it controlled because the number of kids people are having maybe are lower. So you're going, well, one kid's a lot easier to manage than the people who are having 9 and going, I need Jesus, whatever it may be.
So true. So true.
And I'm not saying any one of these is statistically significant or contributing, but I think all of them together are making some of these reasons why maybe we don't have those natural points in life where we come back to Jesus.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have all these other things that are offering their voice and their promise for help and assurance of why things are going to be okay if you follow my plan, whatever it may be, whether it be social media, whether it be working out, whether it be whatever. That will be the solution. And every person is looking to something to make them whole. And I think now with the world that we live in, there's so many more of those available, those falsities that are being offered. And for a while, they are satisfying. That's why they work.
And effective.
Right? And so I think there's just a need for the church to learn a new language, to speak the way of Jesus and the kingdom of Jesus to this day that we also haven't yet. And so I think sometimes young people are leaving because they've gotten a taste of the real gospel and are going, but the church isn't offering it.
Right. Yeah.
Or they're not hearing what the gospel has to offer in their day and in their life because the church is so used to speaking it in old ways. And it doesn't speak to today. And so I think sometimes to give credit to why some people are leaving the church, because the church has failed to do its job in showing why it's valuable to the new generation.
To replug invisible Jesus.
Yep.
That is really what they talk about in that book.
Yep.
Is that they are seeing the deconstruction, and they use that term, and the people leaving the church as a prophetic movement.
Correct.
And that's really the approach they take in that book, which I really, really thought was cool. Like
Very
it
clever.
really, and requires a great degree of humility for a theologian and a pastor to sit down and say, this is God moving in a way that we need to acknowledge and we need to recognize.
Yeah.
I would like to take a moment or two to just address the term deconstruction, because, and I'm not saying that this person has to like the term. I love the term. I love the term for a couple of reasons. I think that we come to Christ partially constructed. We don't accept Jesus the day after we came out of the womb. So we've built a worldview. And deconstruction is the deconstructing of my worldview and of what I believed before. Originally, when you first come to Jesus, there's a lot of deconstruction of that. But as we deconstruct that, we build something new. And then I think it's only natural to, at some point later on, need to deconstruct that again.
Yeah.
Like again, using the idea of home renovation, right? You move into a house and you're like, this place needs some work.
Yeah.
And you fix it all up. And then maybe 10, 15 years later, we need to do that. We need to change this. I always go back to Jesus' words where he says, the Spirit will lead you into truth. And as long as he's leading me into truth, which he will need to do for the rest of my life, till I get to heaven and then I know in full, I will need the Spirit to continually lead me into truth. That means there's something I understand or believe that is not true.
Yeah.
And in order to come into that truth, some lie needs to be dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
Some wrong way of thinking needs to be deconstructed. I think sometimes part of the issue that people have with the term deconstruction is that it's been used widely and casually. But I think also is because we view sometimes discipleship as the accumulation of things.
Yeah.
And not recognize that discipleship is not the accumulation of things, but discipleship is also the surrender of things.
Yep.
And yes, you gain knowledge, but as you gain knowledge, it should lead to surrender of different aspects of your life and surrender of different ways of thinking and all of that. So I have really come to appreciate the action sense of the word deconstruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, I like you saying that because it redefines it a little bit, because I think for a lot of Christians or believers, when they have first heard of deconstruction or someone says they're deconstructing, it just leads to they do not believe in Jesus anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume the end.
And that is a fearful state or a sad state, because it's like, oh my gosh, these people that I love no longer are believing what I believe or what I think,
But I'll
God
reference
loves them.
Invisible Jesus again, where the vast majority of the people who deconstruct end up with a deeper faith.
Correct.
Yes. And that's a good realization. That's why I'm saying thank you for saying that, so that our listeners, watchers, whoever can recognize that it's not always just a bad ending, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of fear baked into certain Christian cultures, especially around the word, because I think it's always a up and to the right assumption about faith.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is not true.
No.
Right?
No.
There has to be I've been growing in my faith, but along with that growth, I made some mistakes and I've picked up some bad habits, or culture has a whatever. And it's assuming that there's one right way to express faith, overriding the diversity that's supposed to be built within Christian practice globally and historically, that has to be also seen. And then there's also within that cultural assumption certain expressions of Christianity that say, but this is our sacred cow, so don't take that don't renovate that part.
Yep.
I remember just grieving over, there was one prominent person in Hillsong who made a big declaration about they were leaving the faith because they had questions around specifically evolution and creation. And hell. Those are evolution, creation, and hell. That was
I think
the
it was
two.
Marty Sampson.
Okay, I can't remember who it was, and I remember going like, "Dude, same." Like that. Those were two of the biggest questions on my heart and mind, and they were the means towards a deepening of my faith. And I did not land where I started.
Yeah.
And it grieved me that there were many churches that don't give you the space to have the same journey that I did. And it was, if you touch those two things, get out.
Yeah.
And that was the response he was getting. And that's part of what has given me renewed joy in pastoring this last 5-10 years, is going, I know there are other people out there who want that journey, and not all the churches are able to make that space. How I want to pastors making space for those things in our context, because for me it has led to a deepening of my faith, and a lot of people are fearful it just lead to the removal of it.
Yeah. So true.
I want to change my analogy for deconstruction as you were talking. Instead of buying a fixer-upper, imagine that you're born and you start building your house.
Right.
And you're a toddler. And you're
That's a way better one.
constructing something, right?
Yeah.
And you build something that's pretty shoddy.
Yeah.
Then you come to Jesus, and Jesus is the master carpenter. And he comes in and he's like, okay, let's start reworking some of these things.
Yeah.
Even what you rework with Jesus in your first year, after your 10th year, you'll want to go back and redo because you'll realize you could have done it better.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's not that Jesus has changed, but as you've walked with him, you've learned more tools, you've learned more skills from the master carpenter.
Yep.
Now I can go back and I can redo the bathroom again, and it'll look even better than it did. You know, and I was really satisfied when it was no longer just a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
But now I realize it could be something more beautiful.
And take the analogy a little bit further, like we are also products of our environment. So at one point, insulate the roof. The thing we've got best for that is asbestos.
Yes.
And 10 years later, culture's moved on and we realized that was not the best thing. And that's not Jesus' inability to do it, but that's just the world that we were living in. And we were making use of what we had available. Now we realize that's probably better than no insulation. It's definitely not as good as this insulation, and we should probably get rid of that. Yeah. And so there's that ebbing and flowing that also happens within time and culture that needs to be available. And so deconstruction is also the means of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we're probably out of time.
Yeah.
So we will wrap up and say thank you for joining us on this episode of InvertedOrthodoxy.com. Why do I say that all the time? I get too far ahead in my thinking. Sorry, everybody out there. You joined us on this episode of Inverted Orthodoxy Podcast, and we love it. Send us your questions. You can do that on InvertedOrthodoxy.com. Rate and review us everywhere you like, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.